Dude, if there's a topic you want me to cover, all you gotta do is ask. I just woke up to a comment asking me to make videos on autism, and quite frankly, I just didn't know there were people out there in my audience waiting for that specifically. You're more than welcome to make requests in the comments, whether it's autism, LGBTQ+, some controversy, or whatever you think I might have an interesting perspective on that is worth putting out there. The more specific, the better. For example, if you want me to talk about special interests, you should also include exactly what you want to get out of the video. Do you want me to gush about my own previous special interests, or do you want me to talk about how our special interests might affect our relationships negatively? Of course, I'm only one person with my unique experience, so I might not be too familiar with certain symptoms or struggles that come with autism, but I do have a lot of autistic friends in Google, so I'm sure we could get an interesting conversation going, you know. If you see someone suggest something you'd also like me to cover, remember to like that comment and maybe respond. The more engagement it gets, the more likely I am to prioritize it, since I can see that it's highly requested. I do have a few cards up my sleeve though, and there's a few things regarding autism that I've wanted to talk about for quite a while. I was actually reminded of one of those topics when I came across a tweet the other day. It's a thread by the Twitter user Dr. Devon Price, link in description, and I'll start off by reading it for you. Everyone shut up! I've got great news. Guess what, bestie? Guess! This video is sponsored by none other than Atlas VPN. Woo! It is a tool that encrypts and hides your virtual location. Whenever you connect to one of Atlas's servers, your IP and DNS address are hidden to protect your precious information. We all Google stuff we don't want anyone to know about, right? I'm not up to anything shady, I just don't want Google to track my activity as I'm looking up how to boil pasta. It's a little embarrassing. Atlas VPN also has a safe browse feature which prevents you from visiting malicious services. Now that I think about it, my mom could actually use Atlas VPN. It would save us a lot of the trouble. Atlas VPN is not only good for cooking pasta without any judgment and moms with no sense of internet security, but I can now watch Lord of the Rings on Danish Netflix, despite being in Sweden. Technically, I could just go there by train, but why would I when I have Atlas VPN and can access any country's Netflix from the comfort of my own home? With only one subscription, it protects all of your devices. That's right, all of them, and it's available on iPhone, Android, Mac and PC. It's genuinely a steal, since Atlas even helps you save money. Yeah, that's right, it genuinely mind blown. Many websites have their pricing adjusted based on the region your computer is in, and with Atlas VPN, all you have to do is switch your location to, let's say, Germany. And the price of whatever you're looking at might have dropped immensely. That's genuinely crazy. Right now, Atlas VPN are running a humongous discount. You can get a 3-year subscription for only $183 USD per month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. All you gotta do is click the link in my description or my pinned comment, and you'll also get 3 months for free. Massive thank you to Atlas VPN. God bless America. Thank you, Jesus! I hear from many trans and non-binary people who are actively seeking an autism diagnosis. My advice is, rethink this. Restricting autistic people's access to gender-affirming care is a major TERF talking point, as legal attacks on trans healthcare mounts. A psychiatric diagnosis is a risk. The high overlap between autism and transness was one of the main concerns J.K. Rowling wrote in her TERF Wars blog post. Numerous fear-mongering anti-trans articles influenced by TERFs have raised the issue since. If you're trans, now is not a good time to seek a formal autism diagnosis. An autism diagnosis does not unlock access to any beneficial therapeutic treatment because there is no treating autism. Formal diagnosis makes us vulnerable to legal and psychiatric control and gets our competence challenged. You don't need to subject yourself to this. Diagnose yourself. I am close with dozens and dozens of autistic people, and I have no idea who has a diagnosis and who does not. It does not matter. There is no reason to ask, no reason for others to care how someone identifies and how they arrive there. All that matters is community support. Also, if you cannot afford to pursue a lengthy and expensive lawsuit, it's unlikely a formal diagnosis will actually protect you from discrimination at work, in school, or in housing. If you have the means, great, but most don't. Disclosing disability can be more risk than it's worth. If you need a diagnosis to access resources such as disability benefits or extra test time, by all means go for it. But be cognizant of the potential costs. You could be denied for surgery, lose control of your assets, be found legally incompetent, lose custody of your kids. In an increasingly fascist reality where disabled people are legally regarded as incompetent and disposable more and more, I cannot with a clean conscience encourage people to formally identify as disabled if they do not need to. There's a lot of factors to weigh here, and I couldn't agree more. Although I wish I could give you a definite answer as to whether you should get officially diagnosed or not, there simply just isn't one. It would be so much easier for me to tell you that there's no point to getting an official autism diagnosis if there weren't any benefits at all. But there is. It's just a question of whether the benefits outweigh the potential harm. Some of us might be in need of disability benefits, which is a humiliating process, unfortunately. I do have a lot of friends that are neurodivergent. A lot of them are self-diagnosed, but neurodivergent nonetheless. Some have decided against an official diagnosis at this moment, since it might put their medical transition at risk. Others are actively pursuing an official diagnosis because of their situation, yet they talk about the undesirable aspects of it, whether it's the loss of bodily autonomy or conservatorship abuse. Unfortunately, there's a lot of reasons why one might not want to have a record of their disability, which makes this whole trend of bullying self-diagnosed people so infuriating. Don't get me wrong, I know for a matter of fact that there's people who either fake illnesses or are misdiagnosing themselves intentionally or not. There's definitely people on TikTok who claim to have X, Y, and Z because it'll give them attention. Usually they're very young. To me, faking something for attention is a sign that there's something else wrong, but that's a whole other topic. What I'm getting at is that this anti-self-diagnosing sentiment completely ignores all the downsides that comes with getting an official diagnosis. This conversation is so much more important than attacking random TikTok users you think are faking their disabilities for whatever reason and going, you're taken away from actually disabled people. This is offensive. Just get a diagnosis. Like, if you're really disabled, it shouldn't be a problem. Just get a diagnosis. If you really cared about disabled people, there's 1,000 times more urgent issues we're facing. Issues you can't blame on a 15-year-old on TikTok. I'm not saying that faking and spreading misinformation about illnesses is all fine and doesn't do harm at all. Correct misinformation, that's all good. But don't make these stupid ass fake disorder cringe compilations, cause I have reason to believe it does 1,000 times more harm than good and encourage people to potentially dogpile a lot of people who are actually suffering from these conditions. Harassment is the last thing they need, and that's why I feel like it's so important to highlight a lot of the reasons why someone might not want to get a diagnosis. I feel like we don't talk about it enough because people would like to think that diagnoses are meant to make someone's life easier. It's meant to help us understand the patient and how to tend to their needs. I mean, it's certainly what it should be about, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. Sometimes it feels like the world is more corrupt than actually functional and fair. It's a lot easier to put your trust in the system when you don't have to deal with it for yourself. A lot of people think they understand autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder, etc. Which to me is dangerous because you're automatically putting this person in a box, and once you've done that, it's gonna take a long time for them to prove to you that they're not the stereotype that you've imagined them to be, because you're only gonna take notice of what confirms your bias. Anything that doesn't fit your worldview is thrown out the window. I might be autistic, but I still pick up on how doctors talk to me. Right off the bat, they think that I have the brain of a child, and whether they intend to or if it's subconscious, I can always tell when the doctor has made assumptions about me based on my diagnosis alone. Unfortunately, my lack of eye contact does nothing to dispute these assumptions, but I am very much cognizant. Please stop talking about me over my head when I am in the room and a 22-year-old man. I am very much following the conversation you're excluding me from. Me staying silent is only furthering their belief that I'm just an empty shell or living in my own little bubble. But how am I supposed to chime in when you automatically assume I'm not capable and don't give me the chance to advocate for myself? I can't help but wonder how many of these struggles are inherent and what's perpetuated by our environment. Whether it's because of the psychological abuse a lot of us grow up with and are forced to endure since no one really gave us the tools to communicate our needs. No one asks why we react so badly to certain stimuli. We're just told to suck it up because we're overreacting. Or if it's because people make assumptions about what we can and cannot do based on our diagnosis, like I said previously, and won't even give us the opportunity at the very least to be in charge of our own life, and therefore we don't have the opportunity to learn how to do that. There's a huge difference between assisting and taking full control and making decisions for someone else. Maybe things would be completely different if no one had these preconceived notions while treating us accordingly. Maybe if people didn't expect so little of us, we would be able to prove that we're more capable than they'd expect. Or maybe nothing would change at all. We don't know. We simply don't know. Our society doesn't seem to produce, for the most part, unscathed autistic individuals. Instead, a lot of us have to endure years of being completely misunderstood, and either when and if we get an explanation for why we are the way we are, that being an autism diagnosis, we're still somehow misunderstood. The label itself is a curse to me because it's used to justify a lot of abuse. Autistic people aren't the problem. The problem is that your humanity is thrown out the window as soon as that label is put on you, and it's no longer how can we help this person, but rather how can we get them to just comply because we just don't want to deal with them anymore.
Autism. If you are not scared, you should be.
As the title suggests, I've been wondering if getting an official diagnosis was the right thing for me. I'd like to think that it is, even though it took a long time for me to accept the diagnosis and get over the initial shame I felt. I've finally been able to understand why I am the way I am, and that it doesn't make me morally corrupt that I can't stand certain sensory input. Any person would react the same way I do if they experienced it the same way as I. However, there's been a bigger threat looming over me ever since I made the decision to live my truth and actually pursue a body I would feel comfortable in. I have yet to hear from the gender clinic, even though I've been on their waiting list for years, and that's something every trans person here in Sweden have to deal with, autistic or not. Even though I managed to track down the only surgeon in Sweden that performs top surgery on people without a gender dysphoria diagnosis, as long as I could provide a letter testifying that I'm of sound mind and have been wanting this for a long time from my therapist I've been seeing for over a year, my medical transition journey is far from over. All around the world we're slowly being stripped of our rights and healthcare, even without the extra hurdle of having autism written across your forehead. A lot of transmasculine people aren't really believed. I know people that are the transgender poster child, knew from an early age that they were trans-het, neurotypical men, embodies our society's definition of manhood. By all means, if anyone would be considered a true transgender, it should have been them. Still, they're not believed. Doctors are hesitant to provide them hormones because they don't trust us to make decisions about our own bodies no matter who you are. They can't fathom that a woman would actually want to be a man. So, if these men had to fight for their right to transition, then my autistic ass stands absolutely no chance. Now, these are just some thoughts that I've had. It doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be the case for me once I actually get to talk to a gender therapist, but these fears aren't exactly unfounded. What immediately comes to mind is the case of Caden Clark, which I brought up in my older video titled Actually, Autism is a Gender. We love clickbait on this channel. This involves medical discrimination, and police brutality, and if that's something you're sensitive to, I'ma put a timestamp here on the screen for you to skip to and do what you gotta do. But basically, Caden was a 24-year-old autistic trans man who was shot to death by police in his own home back in 2016, the 4th of February. The police had gotten a call about a, quote, woman threatening suicide, unquote, CNN reported. Two officers were talking to Caden through the door before he opened it, holding a knife with an 8-inch blade, allegedly lunging himself at the cops. Both fired their weapons in self-defense, despite each having a stun gun. Detective 𝗬𝗂𝗶𝗰𝗲 states that the device sometimes becomes ineffective when someone starts moving a lot. Now, I obviously have no training or experience with stun guns, so I could be way off. But what the fuck is even the point then? I mean, yeah, there's probably situations where someone is standing still but is a threat, but more often than not you'd think that the reason you'd have to use a stun gun is because someone is making quick and intimidating moves. With all this police brutality, I find it hard to believe that fatally shooting this autistic man with a fucking knife, not a gun, a knife, was their only option, and it has totally absolutely nothing to do with cops being eager to abuse their power whenever they can, because they can. I should also mention that neither officers wore a body cam, because of course they wouldn't when they're playing with others' lives. Why would it be necessary for you as a cop to have footage of you taking another person's life? Why would it be necessary to keep an eye out on officers? Now, it's very possible that Caden purposely provoked the police because he wanted them to shoot him. In one of his YouTube videos on his channel where he intended to document his transgender journey, he mentioned already having attempted suicide by cop before.
To write me a prescription to say, hey look, in my chart it says I've tried suicide, I've tried suicide by cop, I've tried myself. All this depression since first grade has stemmed from not being able to transition. If you're too ignorant to fucking help me, I will help my own fucking self. Seriously, I know there's risks to this. I don't give a shit at this point.
This was obviously a cry for help. He's saying it loud and clear. He's struggling with his mental health because he's not allowed to transition. He couldn't have made it more obvious. Still, he's continually being let down by the system who refuse to understand autism. In his last video posted the 9th of January 2016, Caden describes his experience with a gender therapist.
How does Asperger's disease affect you? And when I list it all, she's like, okay, well, we need to fix your Asperger's before I read a letter for your doctor in order for you to start T. I don't know any neurological disorder, whether it's Tourette's, seizures, autism. I don't care what other types of autism there is, depending on which DSM you and your doctor use. You can't cure neurological disorder. I wish there was a pill. It'd make my day easier. It'd make my life easier. It's ignorance. It's frustrating. She kept saying the word disease every time I kept correcting her. She didn't even understand it. She said, I don't know anything about Asperger's disease.
I feel for him. I truly do. Because I'm in a pretty similar situation right now. It really didn't have to end like this. And for what you might ask, nothing has changed. Transphobes are still concerned trolling regarding autistic trans people. Caden isn't the only trans person who's been denied treatment due to their neurodivergency. His case just so happened to have been published. And even then, it's still barely talked about. It's not brought up whenever discussing the discrimination autistic people face when seeking trans healthcare. And I wish I could say you just need to stand up for yourself and be proud of who you are because you're awesome and autism doesn't make you less capable. But that's not how this works. That's not an option for your everyday person when talking about the gatekeeping of resources. If you're trans, and if you desperately need to medically transition, but you also suspect that you're autistic, then my best advice is to put your autism diagnosis on hold. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's what you have to do if you want to survive. It's too late for me. I would say I regret getting diagnosed, but can you really regret something when you didn't have a say in the first place? Not only was I too young to fully understand the consequences of being officially diagnosed, but I can't even remember anyone telling me what the hell was going on at any point throughout the entire process. No one ever told me that autism was even suspected. Instead, all I can remember is going through some type of evaluation process, being asked a bunch of questions, asked to leave the room, and when I came back, all the adults kept talking above my head. I had to use context clues, and when we left, I asked my mom, do they think I'm autistic? And she told me no. I had been diagnosed with autism. Would have been so much easier for me to understand if I wasn't treated like a pet at the vet, but that's just me. That's just my experience. Some of you might relate, others of you might not. Please be respectful of our differences in the comments and try to have a more productive conversation. Remember to also like, subscribe, turn on all notifications, follow me on Twitter and donate to my Ko-Fi if you feel generous, that is. Also, remember to check out the link in the description, save your soul from eternal damnation and get Atlas VPN. Not only is it great and you should have a VPN, but at the same time, you're helping me out, you're saving money, like come on, it's a win-win. Thank you, Atlas VPN, and thank you, dear viewer, for watching my content. I love you, bro. Bye.